Welcome, food enthusiasts, to this episode of the FutureFoodCast. I'm Pam Miller, your host, and we have a really great guest who's going to delve into an area that not a lot of us think about, but that impacts every one of us. We have Alfred Scoglio with us, and he is a food safety consultant with a really broad background that he's going to tell us a little bit about as we go. Welcome to the podcast, Alfred.
Thank you so much, Pam. I'm really happy to be here and tell your listeners all about food safety. I mean, that's really what I consider my career all about.
Yeah.
I started out in my younger years as a food inspector, and I learned a lot about food safety as a regulatory person. And then I started my own business, and we've been in business for 20 years now. And so we do all kinds of things. But before I get into that, I just wanted to give your listeners a reason why they need to think about food safety.
That would be great. Thanks.
Yeah. So I was doing a little bit of research and I found that about 163 million people, or 64% of adults, dine out at least once a week. So that's a lot of people that eat out. And another study said that the average American eats out 5 times a week. So then you have to think about, okay, what is everybody doing when they're not eating out? Of course, they're shopping. Okay. So we have restaurant safety to think about and supermarket safety, which includes everything down the line from suppliers, farms, everything. We want to make sure we're eating food that is not only good quality and wholesome, but safe to eat, so we won't get foodborne illness. So everybody is affected by food safety. Now, the not so fun statistics is how many people get sick. According to CDC, about 30 million people get sick every year from a foodborne illness from eating out. And that boils down to, 50,000 hospitalized. And unfortunately, 3,000 people die every year from foodborne illness. So it's pretty serious stuff. The only thing I can tell you that's good news, especially about that last number, is that has decreased a lot over the last 3 decades that I've been teaching. It used to be 9,000 deaths a year, and now it's only 3. And that's because we've raised the level of compliance in restaurants and supermarkets and, across the board with food safety. So it's a very good place for consumers to be now, rather than in the 50s and 60s. We know more what kind of conditions cause foodborne illness. And so as an inspector and as a consultant, because we do both, we go out and enforce the food code, emphasizing things that we call risk factors, things that are more apt to cause foodborne illness, like a sick employee or an employee with poor personal hygiene, or somebody not washing a cutting board after they put raw chicken on it and not sanitizing. So we're looking for all kinds of things like that, so all of your listeners can benefit. All of us eaters.
Yeah, all of us eaters. And we don't really think about all that that happens before we get our food. I mean, we want it to be safe, and we know generally it is, but as a consultant and an inspector, it's really very specific, the things that you're looking for when you go into a restaurant or a food preparation area. I know on the front end, you talked about kind of being a consultant. You actually go in and help before restaurants are even creating their spaces, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do pre-operational inspections.
Yeah.
And we even before that sometimes do a plan review. I have a client right now that's opening up a restaurant, and they need to submit their plan to the health department before they can even build, before they can even renovate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm helping them with their application process, guiding them and, the right equipment, the right location, staffing, et cetera, all that stuff.
Sure. And
Yes.
that's a really important function that some of us don't even realize happens. I know that things have to go through approvals and all that, but the fact that it's to the health department, that it's health and safety related. And that's really where your expertise is. And then you come forward to when the locations are actually operating. And how do you get involved on that part? I mean, I've seen those restaurant grades up and all the different things that are checked off. Is that really what you're involved with?
Well, yes, not specifically the grading, but yes, there are some towns in Massachusetts I know of, some of the larger towns that will have that, you know what I mean? But the state food code doesn't require that. It just requires compliance, okay? So we don't go in there with the mindset of, this place is going to either pass or fail. We just want to check their compliance. So number one, my job as a reporter, especially when I'm working as a consultant, because we do contract work for several towns, doing regulatory inspections under contract. Okay. So I'm reporting to the town what I see. And of course, I'm making recommendations to the owners and managers, giving them pointers and trying to educate them. It doesn't do much good to say you're wrong and leave it at that. You have to explain why it affects food safety. And in many cases, it affects their bottom line. If they get a foodborne illness, it doesn't make good news.
That's a really important function. And I should say, I mean, you're in Massachusetts, but the states all have regulations that they set. So this is happening here in the United States, at least in all of the states to some level.
That's correct. So the federal government puts out a document called the Federal Food Code, and it's kind of like the Bible of the food industry. So states, counties, and other jurisdictions use this food code as a template for their own regulations. So usually it's the states that pass a regulation, like for instance, in our state, almost 4 years ago now, actually it was 4 years ago, we passed a new regulation, 2018, and that was based on the 2013 version of the Federal Food Code. So, and this Federal Food Code is very interesting because it's written by a group of experts, and they're known as the Conference on Food Protection, which when they meet every 4 years, there's people from regulatory, there's people from academia, and there's people from the food industry. And they decide on what needs to be changed, what can be improved. Whenever there's new concepts or new equipment, maybe we need to regulate just so we can ensure safety. You know what I mean? Like, there's a certain bacteria called Listeria that, can cause very serious illness. And years ago, it wasn't known that it grows in refrigerated temperature at the time, which was 45 or below. So when scientists did some studies, and of course, this was presented to the conference, and they recommended to the FDA, hey, this Listeria grows at 42 degrees. 45 is not safe enough. So guess what? Now the regulation is 41. So that's what this body does, making recommendations to FDA. And then all that knowledge and wisdom is passed on to the states. And usually states follow it, maybe not 100% because they might want to change some enforcement procedures or whatever. But basically, Massachusetts and other states follow the food code. So it's pretty much a standard of quality and safety.
Yeah. Good to know that that's out there and that it also is open to changing as we're able to discover more things.
That's
about,
right.
Foodborne illness or what might cause people problems, then they can put that into the food code to be adopted by the states and put out for everyone to benefit from. Like you said, in your example, wow, that was a great revelation. And now everyone is going to be safe from that illness if the temperatures are kept. So that's the other part. I'm sure that you probably get involved with making sure, helping to know that the temperatures make sure restaurants have their temperatures set correctly so that they're going to be following that.
That's right. So refrigeration temperatures, extremely important, cooking temperatures, holding temperatures. There is what we call a danger zone where foodborne illness bacteria or pathogens like to grow. And so we don't want food to be hanging out in that range very long. And that's 41 to 135 Fahrenheit.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what we do lots of times because, when you take food out of the fridge to prep it, of course, it's going to get warmer. Okay. Or if you take hot food and you take it off the heat source, it's going to get cooler. And both of those actions of basically doing nothing but watch it get more and more into the danger zone are dangerous if it's there too long.
Yeah. So procedure wise, I guess setting it up so that you're not having those situations occur, trying to keep your supply and demand going to such an extent that you're not going into the danger zone with too much food. You want to really be able to process that well. I'm imagining to set it up that way on the front end. So that's really important.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Tell us about some of the different, I know there's different regulations and codes. I mean, there's a universal code you had mentioned before, and some of the different things you follow. Can you break that down a little bit for our audience?
Sure. So when I was talking about the federal food code, I mean, that's actually not the regulation, but what stems from that is the state regulations. Okay. And some city and county jurisdictions have their own too. But anyway, so that's the regulatory piece of food safety enforcement. Of course, in our state and many states, it is the local cities and towns that actually enforce the state code. In other jurisdictions, it's the county or the state goes out and does the inspections. Then you have food industry standards, which sometimes can go above and beyond what regulations require. Okay. And this is usually for quality purposes or for, like if somebody's making their favorite sauce, and everybody likes their hot sauce and they want to sell it. Okay, if you want to get on the shelf of a major supermarket chain, they're going to require you to have a Hassa Plan. Now, a Hassa Plan is basically a food safety plan that takes into account things that could go wrong, which we call hazards, and has a plan for dealing with them. Okay. And making corrections if needed, etc. Okay. So this Hassa Plan wouldn't normally be required for them making this sauce, say, in their own restaurant. But once they bottle it and sell it wholesale and put it in a supermarket, the supermarket chain and, their customers may require this extra layer of safety, if you will, which is called the Hassa Plan or food safety plan.
And Hassa is capital H, capital A, capital C, capital P. If anybody wants to go look that up.
That's right.
Might be interested in that or has a product out there that they're thinking, I do want to commercialize this and sell it. To Alfred's point, you're going to have a Hassa Plan. So go check that out and get that part done. Well, there's also, you make available, and I know that a lot of food service people take classes in proper procedure and how to handle. That's one of the things that your consultancy does as well, as offers training, correct?
That's right. So across the country, what's required in the federal food code as well as the state food code is food manager certification. And it's a comprehensive, video presentation, or, I do an in-class personal presentation with a slideshow, and then we give an exam. So they're required to pass the exam and have at least one person per shift who is certified or at least knowledgeable. And then they get a certificate and they post it. And, this is what one of the things inspectors look for, that people are properly trained. And that's one of the reasons that I stated earlier that the statistics, the bad news is getting better, as far as foodborne illness, frequency, because of the requirement of certification, which wasn't around, say, before 2000, So it was voluntary, but as of the year 2000, at least in Massachusetts, it became mandatory. So we do that training. We also do another training called Allergen Awareness Safety. When I was a kid, I didn't know anybody that had a food allergy.
I know.
But nowadays, if I happen to go to a daycare and I do an inspection, I ask about allergens, there'll be like a dozen out of 20 kids or 30 kids that have some kind of food allergy. It's absolutely crazy. So yes, that is regulated, and people have to be very careful when a customer comes into their establishment and stating that they have a food allergy.
Yeah.
And so you have to make sure that you're preparing that food safely so it doesn't get contaminated with things that they might be allergic to.
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a big deal. The allergens and just allergy-free preparation. I've talked to even some universities, for example, that are creating allergy-free, the top 7 or 8 allergens. They're creating kitchens that guarantee the food prepared there will not have any of those top 7 or 8 allergens that people are identifying these days. And so it is a much bigger issue for the public, and to be paying attention to menus and how food is prepared. I know I've seen where they'll say this is prepared along, other things here that are prepared have nuts or whatever it might be, gluten.
Absolutely.
They want to make sure, and I'm sure that is a legal thing for them to have on their information so that somebody knows that's the case, and they're not going to be liable when consumption happens and it might have a little bit of nut on it or gluten or whatever the allergen might be.
That's right. So these are all things that we look for. And then one other piece of training that we do is there's a training called the food handler card, which is for people that are preparing food. Some towns require it, that everyone who's handling food go through a very basic training. And that one can be done at home. They don't have to come to a class. That's only a couple-hour video. And then we also do CPR and anti-choke. Because there is a requirement, at least in Massachusetts, if your restaurant has 24 people or more, somebody needs to be trained in anti-choke, so that can save a life, obviously. So
yes,
our team is doing that, and we've just started up our classes here in 2022.
Very neat. Well, I have always kept my CPR and first aid certification up to date because I think it's very important. You never know who you're going to be around. It could be a family member or loved one, but it could also be a stranger that might need your help.
Absolutely. Sure.
To be able to render that help is really, really important when you're in that environment. What else is there that we need to know about what you're doing, Alfred, and what consumers should know or what they should be looking out for in the area of food safety? Anything at home that we need because we aren't inspected. So what are some of the things that we can be thinking about? I've heard you talk about not leaving maybe cooked food out for too long. You talked about that in the process so that it starts to get warmer and get in the danger zone. So that's a takeaway for me. Sure.
I can think of a few things here. So absolutely. Don't leave food out in the danger zone. 1 hour is okay. Of course, when you're going from cold to hot or hot to cold, you have to pass through this danger zone, which is expected, and it's perfectly normal. But leaving it there more than 2 hours, like 3 or 4 hours, that can be dangerous because bacteria multiply. They multiply by just splitting in half, and they can do that under the right conditions in just 20 or 30 minutes. So you have, 2 plus 2 is 4, 8, 16, 32. The numbers get huge in a very fast time.
Yeah.
And what else was I thinking of? So storage. One of the things that's important with dairy, especially with regard to this bacterial listeria, is make sure that any cheese you have in your refrigerator, first of all, your refrigerator is cold and it is maintaining 41. You should have a thermometer in your own fridge where you store your perishables. And if it's not, certainly, adjust it or get a new fridge, whatever you need to do, but 41 or below is what you need to safely store what we call TCS foods or potentially hazardous foods.
Okay.
So, and with cheese especially, adhere to the sell-by date or the use-by date. Don't use it past the date. You know what I mean? Something like milk, it goes bad. We can smell it or we can look at it and we don't even have to think about, is it good or not, And of course you can look at the date too, but sometimes with cheese, because it has a longer shelf life, people aren't apt to check it to see when it's actually expiring. So, and of course, that's one of the things where, listeria has been found. So just be careful of that.
Good. I definitely will, because I really enjoy cheese, and I don't always look at the use by date. I often will just look at it or taste it, but which is not the best thing to do, right? It shouldn't be doing
right.
It might not be good. Oh well.
Yeah. And another general point, hopefully people are doing this anyway, but washing your hands whenever they become contaminated, especially after using the bathroom, whether you're home, whether you're in a public restaurant, that's a must. And then, cleaning and sanitizers. People don't use sanitizers at home, but hopefully they have a dishwasher, with a hot setting. Some even have a sanitizer setting, but if you're cleaning it good. I remember when I worked for the state, they actually did a study, 2 heads of lettuce. And one of them, they just rinsed. They didn't use any soap or anything, but they rinsed it like you normally would. Like when you open up a piece of romaine, you might see dirt in there. So obviously you remove all that stuff. And then the other one, they did nothing to. And they put them on a petri dish and counted the bacteria the next day. The one that wasn't washed had 10,000 times more bacteria than the one that was.
Oh,
so if you're doing a good job cleaning, you really are removing most of the bacteria. Okay. When you add the sanitizing step, you're doing even better. You know what I mean? But certainly we don't want to sanitize food, that just puts chemicals in food that we don't want. Yeah. So you clean your hands, at least 100 degrees Fahrenheit, your water should be, soap, make sure you're scrubbing good. Sometimes people forget to do, in the crease or their cuticle or fingernail or wrist, get it all so your hands are clean. And of course, if you're working in a food establishment, you need to use gloves when you're handling anything that's not going to be cooked. We call those ready to eat foods.
And when people go to your training class, they will learn that.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Well, and thank you for going a little bit down a rabbit trail with me, Alfred. But I was just thinking, we're talking about commercial situations, but most of our audience also prepares food at home.
Yes, I get it
all the time. And so really good, helpful tips for us to take away to be able to use in our own environments to just improve that food safety, just even at home. So you work in the front end with providers and food service providers. You're also working in the active restaurants and other facilities that are preparing food. You're helping with the training of personnel that works in the food space. We have covered a lot of things here, but is there anything else you want to leave with our listeners before we go today?
Well, I think we covered a lot. One of the other things that we do is we work for food processors, warehouses, bakeries, bottling plants. If they want an inspection to help them prepare for the state coming in or FDA coming in. So I have many clients like that. And of course, some, if they need a Hassa Plan or food safety plan, I will develop that for them. I will review it. I will revise it. Right. And so, we offer a lot of services out there, and, hopefully you can leave my contact information and website, so if people want to contact us, it'll be easy for them.
Yeah, that'll all be connected with this podcast so they can find you. And good to know that you can do kind of the pre-inspection inspection. the state or whatever's coming in, you can help them prepare. And that's going to up level their food safety process across the board, because we all know the negatives of a manufacturing facility or other facility not following the proper procedure or not taking care of an issue when it's happening. I mean, it causes just havoc down the line, and we've seen some issues in the recent news. So you have a very important function, and we really appreciate you coming and sharing with us today, Alfred. Thanks for being on the Future Foodcast.
Very glad to share. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Future Foodcast. Future Foodcast is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.